Hey folks, Steve here with another Highway to the Kremlin video for you today. This is going to be turn 4. Um, so we're kind of in the back half of the scenario. And right now, the French are feeling really good in terms of victory points. They're certainly going to edge out a victory unless something changes, and it will be on the Russians to try to make a change. Um, Bar- Barclay de Tolly and Platov, I guess. I guess maybe I should have rolled for Platov. Nope, he's screwed. Um, Barclay de Tolly was run into a river and defeated, basically, by Napoleon, though Napoleon took a very large amount of casualties, all things told. But they hold a sort of central position. Moscow is not far away, though there are enough garrisons nearby that there'd be some kind of last stand of remnant forces. However, Kutuzov still has a whopping, let me make sure I get like 14 strength points um, of Russians smack dab in the middle of all of the French forces. And that does kind of lead you to think about, well, who has the central position now? It's Kutuzov. He could try to make something happen here to force Napoleon to make a move and do something, I guess, is going to be the key thing. And how much he does and what he decides to do with it will be the tough thing. Now, at the beginning of this turn, there's going to be the administrative scenario where the Russian supply marker comes back up, face up in Moscow, effectively restoring supply and lines of communication to Kutuzov. So he's not going to worry too much about that problem, other than affecting uh, the morale situation negatively affecting Russian attrition and positively affecting French attrition, which could mean a lot more flexibility for French forces. There's definitely a desire and a need to try to send somebody up to take Moscow and kind of seal the deal. And if I get into Moscow, while we're playing the battle scenario, for funsies, I guess, I'll play with the negotiation table and just see, if this is what would have happened at the end of a campaign, how would this war have gone? Because, one of the two Russian main army forces has been eradicated. So pretty big deal. Now the Russian capabilities right now um, are what they are, and they're going to have to decide: do they try to hurt Napoleon or what? That's really kind of the question. Are they going to try to fight Napoleon and have something happen, or are they going to try to pick on smaller stacks like the Poles, maybe, and try to disrupt the French position that way? There's kind of a couple different ways to go here. Um, so the Russians are going to have to decide. Now they've got uh, the movement commands to kind of do what they want. There's a couple of things that we're going to have them do. Um, First things first, we're going to get a major general up here. That's just to make sure that if multiple garrisons are together, that there's a leader there to control them. That's a straightforward thing that the Russians can do. There's a garrison here and one in Moscow. If the French were to repulse the garrison all the way back to Moscow, those garrisons could actually operate together and try to hold out at Moscow itself, though it wouldn't necessarily stop the French from getting in there, I would think. It just depends on what happens. Um, and then really, in terms of the rest of this, it's just going to be, where does Kutuzov want to go? What can be done? Um, how do we make this work? One thing we could try to do is try to push the artillery away. And given that the artillery is by itself, I'm a little worried about its ability to operate, to be honest. You'd almost think that they could like attack and capture the artillery. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. Um, the trick with retreating being what it is. So a retreating force must retreat the total number of hexes called for. It may not retreat through the same hex. It should not retreat through friendly forces. Um, must be made towards a friendly supply source. So if we did chase this stack, they'd have to retreat that way, I guess. Um, and yeah. So we could do it, and then we could try to pick on the Poles maybe. There remains a problem that like, can we attack Napoleon? Because Napoleon, if you see here, is going to be maybe forced to retreat across rivers himself, which would be a very dangerous position for Napoleon and could lead to some nasty business depending on how this goes. And so those are kind of the options, right? We could push the artillery out of the way, maybe not a big deal. So yeah, I don't know. If we try to attack Napoleon, what would probably happen is Davout would simply join him, or very likely would join him in the combat. So um, I don't know. Let's try it. I mean, this is one of those things. I don't know how else to approach this. Doing the roll for attrition, they're I'm pretty sure fine for attrition. Uh, Barely moved at all, and we would go into Zoc. And I think that's all there is to really do here, guys. To be honest, I mean, what we could try to do is activate the garrison, and it doesn't do anything for the moment. And then it's a question of, hey, do we have, uh, would we have the French response come in? So let's say, let's roll for the artillery, I guess. No, let's roll for the Poles because the Poles might want to help out here. And the Poles are in. So what we could do is go 1, 2, and that's only with 3 string points, so this should be good to go. Yep, he's good. And then we'd want to throw in, I guess, Davout. And Davout is in it if he wants to be. Um, so we've got a great big stack that's going to come in. Ay, ay, ay. Let's see if there's anything that's going to stop us here. Maybe this is going to turn out bad for the Russians again. All right, so as the forces congregate here, it's going to be 14-16 in favor of the French, actually, but the Russians are going to get an opportunity to fire their artillery because they do have two, so they're going to be on the 2 to 3 table, and cavalry differential does not matter. Greater than or equal to 2 to 1, so long as someone's got three. Well, that's not the case. It's equal number of cavalry. And the leader bonus doesn't apply because Kutuzov's in command of the force. And so they need to roll a 1 or a 2. And they rolled a 4, so they miss. So artillery not being super effective, to be honest. And Kutuzov being the commander does not have a bonus. We are in non-affecting terrain. And what would be the options here? Well, given just the overall situation, I think both would go with pitched at this point. Mostly because retreating would not be ideal. I mean, what happens if the French retreat? They're going over a river. I don't want that. If the Russians retreat, yeah, maybe that's what they ought to do. They can at least bounce away and reroute themselves. Well, yeah, maybe they can stop before the river, I guess. Um, we'll see. But I think that's the right call. The French definitely can't retreat um, very well, very far. They're really stuck. Um, as I believe the retreat rules require you to be moving as far away from your opponent as you can. Oh, this path may include hexes adjacent to the enemy. Um, there's no penalty for retreating into hexes adjacent to the enemy. Okay, well then, the French actually could retreat this way. And if the Russians had to retreat, their problem is they're still going to be stuck retreating this way, but they may be able to avoid it. So I think maybe both will go pursuit, and let's just see what happens. Um, and really, I'm not sure that the French even want to deal with pursuing if they win it. So what this because it's 14-16, this is actually rounding down to the 1 to 2 column, which is not good for the Russians. The fact that the Polish got the got to activate and did not have much in the way, no one really had attrition here, makes a big difference. And so we'll would we want to counterattack if we lost? It could just be worse off. No, we're going to go with pursuit for both. Let's just see what happens. So on the 1 to 2, Russians get a 4, which is a 1 and 1. So Russians lose 1. And French lose 1. And well, actually, no, the Russians don't lose 1. They retreat 1. And if it's only going to be a retreat that far, I would maybe try to pursue there. So let's try it. Unfortunately for us, it's going to be a +1 of the die roll. The retreat is only 1, so we'd have to roll a 1, and we don't get it. So in this case, the French actually got hurt. The Russians pulled away. And now we're going to have to sort out the joint consolidation, in which case we're going to need to move stuff around. So I think the easiest thing is to just have this guy pop out, and then we'll have the Poles with Napoleon. And I think he has the command span for that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. Yeah. And in fact, Napoleon can command that whole group if he needed to. I don't think that we want to. But yeah, there you go. So a little bit of a rebuff, kind of an awkward situation there. And now it is going to be over to the French turn, rightly or wrongly. And I think it's pretty obvious that what we're going to have happen is we're going to have Davout and Napoleon both go. And here's what Davout's going to do. I think this is the thing to do. We're going to go, because he's got 8 strength points. He's simply going to push 1, 2, 3, which pushes this guy into this hex. And he's going to go into the Zok. And he's going to try to go for Moscow, while Napoleon plays basically little funky monkey action here. So going a half, basically 2.5 to get into here and absorb the artillery. But he's going to remain outside the Zok of Kutuzov because he's really just screening the main Russian army at this point, while we have Davout go up here. So effectively having gone 1, 2, 3, he's going to have to roll for attrition. But granted, at this point, let's see. He will take no attrition. Davout won't take attrition. Napoleon won't either, for that matter, I don't think. I mean, I'll roll it just to make sure. Yeah, he won't either. Okay, so then we have... What do we have? We've got... Actually, let's do this. You would leave Napoleon here, and we'd put that guy there. That's fine. And the reason why we're doing this is because we want to sit on the hex there and make it hard so that if Kutuzov activates, like, he's just not going to be able to get up to Moscow if he activates to respond. So let's see what happens. We're going to let Kutuzov try to run and stop what's going on. Actually, even smarter of a thing would be to, well, yeah. What would we do? We'd leave this guy up, and we drop him off. Is basically what we would do. So we're closing up the lane. So that would really actually be for Napoleon. It still wouldn't be, yeah, even if I re-rolled attrition, that wasn't going to do anything. So he drops off the poles. He sits on the road. Granted, the French numbers are far inferior to Kutuzov's number, but we're not worried about that. We'll have a fight if we have to fight. That has to wait for the Russian turn. What's important here now is if, let's say, Kutuzov tries to activate, and he fails anyway, so it doesn't matter. Kutuzov can't activate for crap. We have Davout attacking here. Now, here's where we're going to get into roles that we haven't really covered yet, which is we've got a city. I'm going to move this out of the way so you can see a bit better. So, Moscow is a city. Within it, we have the Moscow garrison. We have a different garrison that retreated back. We've got the supply source, which has a garrison strength point, and the major general who's going to control all 3 strength points. That's great. Now, a city like this is considered a fortified town. So as we look at the terrain chart, we say, okay, what's city? Okay. And then we see it's same as a fortified town. What's a fortified town do? It's affecting terrain, and the defender up to 3 strength points, which that's how many are there, are doubled and can always pick pitched battle. So this is going to be, while Davout is going up there for the big fight, this is kind of a do or die situation because those 3 strength points become 6 strength points. So while Davout is operating with 8 strength points, it's only 1-1 with a -1 to his die roll. So he's going to have to hope to roll reasonably well. It could be that he fails, to be honest, on affecting terrain, right? 1-1. So we've got to try to roll, well, at least somewhere 1 to 3 or 4, because the counterattacks are going to have an impact. So let's give it a roll. And I mean, yeah, that'll help. Okay, 1-1 affecting terrain is a 1-1. So we lose a garrison. Davout loses. I'm going to kill off one of these Polish units, I guess. And that's going to lead to a counterattack from the Russians. Now, they have 2 strength points and are doubled to 4 now because they lost 1, but they functionally lost 2 for combat. And that garrison doesn't affect anything for victory purposes, but losing the French does, or the Polish unit does. So now it's 4 attacking 7. So this is 1-2 affecting terrain. I'm sorry, 1-2 not affecting terrain as it happens. But the Russians don't get any bonus. Okay, well, that's not good. That's a 4. So wait, 1-2 non-affecting is a 1-1. Okay. Which we're going to lose another Polish unit. That's another loss for the French. So the losses are kind of starting to lean back the Russian way. So okay, well that was the 1 round. Now from here, I mean there's really no choice. We can't retreat with our supply marker, so this kind of has to be a pitched battle, I guess. And unfortunately, it's 6-2, 3-1 in affecting terrain with a -1 for the French bonus, and that is just going to end up being good enough. 3, 1, and 2. So the French lose yet another point of strength. This Major General will just simply remove. This is gone, and we're going to have to find a new place for it. I'm going to say Kaluga, maybe, or well, we'll say Tver up north because that's closer to Kutuzov. And oh, actually, well, this is the thing. It doesn't really matter. So even if we 3-1 affecting 3-2, so that would have turned it into a pursuit actually, and they would have had to retreat 2 hexes, but the garrison I don't think can actually retreat. So yeah, so we would try to pursue then, and the main thing is we're going to walk into the hex, basically, is what's going to happen here. So 5-0, nothing's added. The retreat was worth 2. We got a 3, which would be a pursuit of 1. So we pursue, and we have taken Moscow. So if this were a campaign game, let's just follow it through. So we have captured Moscow. Okay. So what do we do? Well, we need to do a morale check, and we need to validate the case on the fire intensity. So upon capture and occupation of any capital city by a French force at the end of the game turn, which it is, we're going to have to roll on the fire intensity table. So again, if you watch the earlier video, this is going to determine. Unfortunately, I'm going to have a hard time getting this to focus. Come on, there we go. I'm going to roll a die. It could be that we don't get any morale points for capturing Moscow. Could be we get a little bit. So we'll roll the die. We want to roll a 1. And we rolled a 4, which is 3 city quarters burn. And we effectively get no morale increase. So the game Paris morale track stays at 3. So this is much like what happened historically. We get to Moscow and it's all burned out. The only difference between history and now is that the French army bagged a Russian force and captured Barclay de Tolly. So that's the big critical difference here. So now that we're in Moscow, now what do we do? Well, there's the negotiation. So this is where I'm going to pretend like I'm playing the campaign game for a second. At the end of each game turn in which the French forces occupy Moscow, the French player will roll on the negotiation table. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we're going to roll 2 dice. And based on the table that we have and the fact that we're on +3 Paris morale, this is the table that we're really looking at. A average die roll will give us negotiation, which is really what we want. So this is this would be a very key thing in a campaign game. I think technically we'd have to still keep playing until the end of these next couple of turns, but let's just see what we get here. So 2d6 on the table. High would be great. So we have 6, which is unfortunately roll again. So this is logical, right? The Russians are saying, no, we're not done yet. We don't know what's going to happen. So we're just going to have to see. At this point, the only forces in the field that are going to matter is the Kutuzov army. And the question is, can it do any damage to Napoleon and or his buddies to shift the game state? I mean, as it is right now, this would certainly be, I think, a French victory. So they've got to change something. They've got to make something, different. Now, it could mean Kutuzov tries to run down backwards and tries to go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It doesn't get him to Smolensk, but it definitely puts him in a particular state, and at which point the French could simply leave a force behind, um, and chase after him. See if that really changes anything or does anything. I'm not sure that it will. So I think if we were to just go ahead and fast forward into turn 4, like this is really the question: what can the Russians do? Can they try to attack? Let's just say they're going to go and try to kill off this French force of three guys. It's conceivable. Now the question would be, can we get anything else to save the Polish's life? Well, we could see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That yeah. Could he get in there to stop him? Probably. Let's give it a roll. We'll roll for Davout, and he's in it. So what he could do is he could leave a major general behind. As soon as I can find my major generals somewhere around here, he could leave a major general behind and leave Junot with that major general, and then go, 1, 2, 3. Probably as he passes through here, we'd want to drop our last garrison, which I just set somewhere away. And that way we've got a consistent supply path out that way. And he gets up in there. Now, granted, he would have to roll attrition because he would have started out of supply. So let's see what we can do with that. So it would be on these, so 5, 0. Nope, he would have no attrition. And then we could see about Napoleon joining the fray. And Napoleon does join the fray. Fantastic. And he scoots over, and he's not going to have any attrition, only moving 1 hex. Now, it would have been nice. Actually, we could have had him have the artillery join us as well. In fact, that would not have been a problem, because it would have been a multi-hex force, I guess, the force march. And what would we have? We would finally have a battle where both forces had artillery, which is interesting. So what would this work out to be? So this would be 14 Russian to 11 French. We've lost some taking Moscow and garrisoning Moscow. And it's really all of our forces on the map that matter. A big consolidation. So 14 to 11. Russians do outnumber the French a bit, but now we have artillery. So the attackers rolling artillery. Is there anything? Cavalry, there's really no cavalry benefit for either side. Leader bonus, there is none, so the Russians just have to get lucky. And they miss. The French will certainly try to hit something. They can hit on a 1 or a 2. And they actually get 1. So there goes a Russian unit off to the dead pile from Gorshakow's force. So that made it even better. So 13 to 11, that's 1 to 1 in terms of the attack. And what would either side have picked here? I think either or. Well, let's see. The Russians need to keep a force in being, and technically so do the French, I guess. be attacking on a 1-1 non-affecting terrain. It is kind of anybody's ball game on that one. So I think a retreat is certainly more beneficial, and I think the French have a clear retreat path better than the than the Russians did before, because they could retreat down 2, 3, and be safe. So yeah, pursuit for both sides, I guess, unless maybe the Russians go pitch, because they're going to lose the game anyway. So there you go. All right, so the Russian attack. They're going to try to make something happen here. They don't have a leader bonus. Non-affecting terrain 1-1. It's 13 to 11. And they roll a 6. So that might be helpful here. They're going to eat crap first, though. So okay. The winner takes 1. So there's a knockoff a Polish force. And then the Russians have to lose 2. Which they do. And now the French have to counterattack. And as it stands right now, they 10 to 11 ends up still going down to 1 to 2, unfortunately. The only difference is Napoleon's got his modifier, which is going to make the big difference, I expect. So 1 to 2 non-affecting terrain. We roll a 1, -1 is a 0. So the French are the victors. So the French get to lose 1. And the Russians have to lose 2. And we go to the second round, which I think they keep their chits here, because the Russians are going to lose no matter what they do. So once again, we're going to have the opportunity for artillery. So Russians are going to go. They miss. French are going to go. They need a 1 or a 2. They actually get 1. Ha! All right. Things are not looking good for the Russians. This might be a whole game collapse here in a moment. So then the Russians are attacking. They've picked pitch. The French have kept pursuit. And, what do we really have? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 on the Russian side. So they've lost a lot. 8 starting from 14? Really? 6? We've lost 6? I need to double check that here. 1, 2. Yeah, I guess they did. That's no good. Wow, that's crazy. So 8 attacking, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so 8 to 9. So this is actually bad for the Russians. Maybe they should have chosen something different, but they didn't expect to lose on the artillery so much. So 1 to 2, not affecting terrain. And they rolled a 4, which is a 1, 1. So again, the Russians are getting chipped away. Ney's corps is gone. Well, maybe I'd keep Ney's Corps and I'd lose some of our cavalry for once. Um, and now there's a counterattack, which will be on the 1-1 -1. All right. Now this one is a 5, and it is a retreat of 1. So I think we would say a retreat of 1, and I don't think that the Russians are going to be able to pursue, but we'll see. No, they don't pursue. Okay, so much for that. And Napoleon manages to get away without too much pain and suffering. Yikes, that was still bloody. Okay, as it stands, both sides have lost 21 strength points or something like that, or it's something abysmal, um, abysmally bad like that. But I'd say right now the French kind of have a better standing on the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 strength points in that stack by itself, and not counting artillery. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in the Russian. So now the Russians are disadvantaged in terms of numbers. They're disadvantaged in regards to numbers. The French get to go, and this is another one of those, like, do the French even really need to do anything on their turn? I'm not sure that they do. The only thing that I would maybe consider here, and if we needed to do a consolidation down here, basically, if I were to reorganize these guys or consolidate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, this whole stack can be in one stack now. What do the French? I mean, the French could choose to attack Kutuzov and would have a very reasonable chance of hurting them. So I say, why not? Let's just go for it. So Napoleon would move up. He hardly moved at all, and his morale makes it such that he doesn't need to do much. We would get into the Zok here. Would Kutuzov try to get away? Well, he might try and fail abysmally at that. And he has no reinforcements that are going to be able to help him. And so we get back into the combat stuff. So this would be, again, all things together. 1, 2, 3. Actually, well, no, they still have cavalry, though not much. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 to the 7. Yeah, 8 to 7. Now the artillery would go. So French artillery miss, and Russian artillery actually hit, which is interesting. So let's see, who would we lose? There would go Ney's Corps at last. So the Russians actually got a hit. Now it's still 7-7, 1-1 odds with a -1. Napoleon's got that advantage that's going to help here. And let's see what. Oh well, I guess we need to decide. We need to decide this. So I would be more than happy to say, maybe pursuit on both sides would be the way that we would do this. Um, and okay, so um, 2. So the French would win. These guys would retreat 1-2. We would try to pursue, and the differential maybe +1, 2 says a 3. We would pursue 1 hex and do 1 strength point. And that's really, I guess, it. So that's the end of the turn again. And let's see, we'd roll the negotiation bit. So here we go. And there's a 10. So we got a negotiation on the negotiation table. We got an N. So negotiations ensue. Armistice is on. Troops into quarters. So what we would do, if this were the case, is we would be sticking quarters markers on these guys. We don't need to worry about attrition or anything like that. So let's see. There's an armistice restrictions that are in place. And at the end of each turn, the French player will continue to roll on the negotiation table with refusal and roll again results interpreted as before. So everything halts basically at this point. During the armistice, players accumulate APs in the campaign game, which we're not worried about. Replacements and reinforcements can happen, but we're not doing that. Except for the command phase and the negotiation table die roll, individual game turns are not played during the armistice. So really, we would just go now to the last turn of the scenario. Everything is in quarters, everything is chill, and then we roll one more time. If we get a negotiation, then it's a French operational victory. We changed history. So, whoops, that's a dropped die. We'll roll 2d6. And that's a 9, which is a negotiation. So there we go, guys. In our pseudo accounting of the game situation, and I'm sure somewhere along the way I've made mistakes. Things have gone goofy. Who knows? Maybe I forgot to roll attrition once or twice, but somewhere along the way, at the point where, because of the morale differential, like the French, if they weren't moving very much, I could look at the table and know that the only result to get anything other than a 0 would have to be a very high die roll, and they weren't coming up. So you can kind of speed past that. So how did this all end up going? Well, I don't know. I don't want to turn this into an extra long. We basically have played through the rest of the battle scenario, and I think once it got to the end where the Russians really didn't have any other option but to try to kill more French troops, um, that was kind of all that could be followed. Now, again, in the battle scenario, maybe we should have kept playing and ignoring the negotiation table. But in this last turn, all that probably would have happened would be that the French would continue to grind down the Russians into nothing, and basically, I don't know what else. We would just say, hey, that's it, or something. I mean, it's really hard to say. But either way, like, there is no Russian army to chase the French out of the Moscow region, I guess. And if we're assuming reinforcements are kind of being hand waved, I mean, there is a force that is operating, and there is a clear line of communication and series of depots from, Prussia, Poland, all the way to Moscow that have French, a French garrison. So yeah, an operational victory. There's some kind of negotiation. The tide of history changes. Napoleon probably still has to go figure out like how to get another army drafted up and to call up a bunch more guys, and like they sign a treaty, and I'm sure that France is having to fight Prussia and or Austria at the same time, but maybe doing that without Russia. Who knows? This is one of those counterfactuals that's really hard to judge. Even if somehow Russia had come to some kind of agreement, would that have really changed anything here? Would Russia not have repudiated such a treaty in 1814 or something while France is fending off the Austrians and the Prussians? I mean, it's really hard to say, guys. Maybe without the Russians involved, Napoleon could have taken the less experienced French and Allied army and defeated individually Austria and Prussia somehow, or maybe Austria without Russia backing would be less likely to try to um, attack France, and Prussia maybe standing alone wouldn't be willing to either. Maybe this is the end of the Napoleonic Wars in a real sense, if Russia is brought to terms and everyone's seen what has happened yet again, that Napoleon wins a grand victory. But this was a battle scenario that was also kind of, in terms of what we were playing here, a battle scenario that was merged with some of the campaign rules just because I wanted to play with them a little bit more, to try to think about the garrisons. Like, I didn't really have to drop these garrisons because the supply line of communication stuff is just within 18, if you start your move within 18 hexes. And um, you could kind of ignore dropping certain garrisons behind you because you didn't really have to. It's only for maybe control of the hex or something. But I deliberately made sure to drop those garrisons where I could because I wanted to, think about the cost of dropping those garrisons and maintain that line of communication. Um, and for the Russians, obviously, the way that this battle scenario went really, really, really came down to the choice to have a pitched battle when maybe they should have just said, I'd rather lose 4 or 5 strength points than 8, and accepted that retreat across the river as a pursuit battle. And maybe Napoleon, would have just, if he kept all the die rolls except for that decision, there maybe still would have been a large enough Russian force that we couldn't simply have run out to Moscow and there'd be a tougher fight of it. Now, on the victory points, the losses were basically even. Um, and so if they were even in the battle scenario accounting, if it's like 1-to-1, I think the French actually get the benefit of that in the rules. So 1-to-1, yeah, French victory point +1. We also get the morale differential, and so we increased our morale by 2 points. So this is 3 victory points in favor of the French. That's a French victory for the scenario, obviously, not even accounting for our twist of the negotiation table being used. So certainly a Bonapartist's dream scenario here of catching, outflanking a Russian army and disintegrating it and basically fending off, the remaining Russian army, while Davout, manages to capture a burning Moscow. So it would have been nicer maybe to pick up Moscow, without it being burned. We didn't get the die roll. Remember, it's 50% chance of not getting a victory point for capturing Moscow. Well, we got that. We didn't get a victory point. But bagging the army and bagging the leader were much more important. So you could maybe imagine here, like, why would the Russians even consider a negotiation? Yes, there were people in the Russian court who were kind of arguing for some negotiation. Well, it probably helps that if Prince Barclay de Tolly has been captured, and Moscow's been taken, and his army was destroyed, and in those kind of last engagements, the remnant Russian army basically on the losing position and not being in a position to get to Moscow, um, yeah, maybe that's a different situation. And you say, okay, we're going to negotiate, because to continue this on, basically there is through winter a way to supply Napoleon's army. Um, they can get, more troops sent up the highway, so to speak, over time. And Napoleon could, either sit in Smolensk or Moscow or somewhere in between and gather up a force to go for another spring campaign against, maybe diluted Russian armies. Now, I would say if you're going to play a battle scenario like this, I might not even set up all this stuff down here because it ended up never really mattering and is a bit of a distraction. And I think it's intended that way because none of those forces were in line of communication with the rules as written for battle scenarios, and they were really just never going to make a truly big difference. Like we did move around those forces over there, and it amounted to basically nothing or nothing of importance. So if you're going to set up this battle scenario just to learn and play the game, I would definitely focus on the main theater and just move forces in and around that box. You could almost draw a box from like a few hexes west of Smolensk and just cut this around, put some pieces of paper and just play in here and ignore everything else. That might save you a little bit of time. And honestly, while it's taken a lot to get these videos out, the actual process, like once you know how to roll attrition, how to move stuff around, how does the combat system go, even if it's a bit clunky, it doesn't actually take that long to play through a battle scenario like this. And in fact, I'm sure if you're playing an entire campaign, it probably doesn't take that much time. I mean, like once the clear theaters of operation are there and you're just moving a handful of stacks, like we're not talking about an hour to think about the turn. I spent more time explaining the gameplay than actually doing it. So once you get the rules down, I mean, you can bang out a turn really, really fast because you're not going to have that many individual counters to shuffle around. You got to do some quick die rolls for attrition, but it tends to move a lot more quickly. And I didn't use the cool little battle write-ups, but maybe I should have, because that would have been maybe a fun thing to jot down. But we can save that for the campaign game. So yeah, there you go, guys. Um, the Borodino battle scenario. Did we have battles of great importance near Borodino? Yes, we did. They went the French's way, perhaps better than the historical counterparts, if only because of Davout's critical outflanking maneuver that was really, most effective because there was no fog of war and we could kind of guarantee a repulse through the enemy there, so to speak. So something to think about. That my game experience will be different from yours. And at the end here, we really had armies fighting with nubs, the nubs of our armies, because they had been whittled down so severely in the fight. The strength point advantage that the Russians had, really existed up until, the climactic Barclay de Tolly disaster. But even then, they held an advantage until a couple of battles didn't go their way. And I think the big key thing there is, Kutuzov has a better command span, but Barclay and Bagration, however you want to pronounce that, Bagration, uh, they have the bonuses. So they are better, being in command for the battle, but they can't bring large forces to bear the same way that Kutuzov can. But Kutuzov is not rated, I guess, to be as good of a leader. He does not have the bonus star that Napoleon excuse me, Napoleon was able to leverage. And basically, a 1-to-1 fight on non-affecting terrain, but you got a -1, like you almost always want to roll that. Like you're almost always going to have a pretty decent result ultimately. I mean, just to show this on the combat chart, remember 1-to-1 non-affecting terrain, this center one. At worst, you roll a 5, or I'm sorry, you roll a 6, which becomes a 5 with a -1, and that's not so bad, right? You might even be willing to accept a pitched battle with that. But if you win, or if you roll decent, you're going to have victory. And for Napoleon, it turns out a 2-hex retreat is capable of you can actually pursue a 2 hex retreat okay. Like it is manageable. You can pull it off with Napoleon. And if you can do that repeatedly, like 1-to-1 odds with your -1, and you force them to retreat 2 hexes, and you're able to pursue at least 1 or 2 hexes, like you're going to repeatedly knock some strength points down off the enemy, and that can be really important. Over time, if you can do that really good. If you're suffering your own, that's kind of a problem, but you eventually, I mean, it feels really hard to create the circumstances where you're going to have anything but a 1-to-2, 1-to-1, or 2-to-1 odds, unless you've really found like, a garrison by itself or a force that's really, really beat up. Like the big concentration of army forces, it's always going to be a really tight gig. So that's why an army, a force with 9 strength points can basically do a reasonable job, just as good of a job at fighting as if it were a 11 strength force if the attacker was 12 strength points, right? Like 12 to 11, that's 1-to-1 odds. 12 to 9, that's 1-to-1 odds. There is no 3-to-2 odds. So the break point becomes really important. You can actually hold off a bad leader with fewer forces. And I think as you look at the CRT and you try to look at the math of it all kind of makes sense. I still feel like I've not mastered the, when exactly is a fine time for a pitched battle. Obviously, if you're like worried about losing Moscow, maybe you do the pitched battle. If there's a situation where like you just can't afford not to win or something, like maybe you go pitched battle, but you have to have a certain numbers advantage for it to be worthwhile. Um, and again, that's where the fog of war can really be helpful. If you know that you have a numbers advantage and you can survive losing the first round, but pull your opponent into that pitched battle so that on your counterattack you can get them munched up. Those circumstances are really tricky of when you want to do the pitch battle. I think it really comes down to like it's a do or die positional moment on the map, which I don't even think that scenario ended up truly being that way. The other is you have overwhelming strength point differential that you can afford to take a couple strength point hits, but it's worth it if you can get the counterattack off. So you kind of have to have, if you're going to run a pitched battle, it's because you have the luxury of a at least localized strength point advantage, that you can afford to lose that first round before the counterattack. But it's tricky, guys. It's tricky. And as you saw, pitched battle goes into that second round. It can be a big bloodbath, especially if both sides are willing to be a pitched battle. It's a mega bloodbath. Crazily so. And what's funny is, to my understanding of the history, like this is accurate. For as weird as the system is, I actually really appreciate it because a lot of it's valid. Like the armies, engaged when it just had to happen that way, or they couldn't, they couldn't manage to break away, or contact with the enemy was happening, and they kind of had to engage more fully. But you can always have like the pursuit, choice, and kind of fight, but be willing to withdraw before things get too bad, or choose your moment to really have a concentrated battle. And marching to the sound of guns could be a factor. Um, the model makes sense and the model works pretty good. It's just a little clunky. That's all. And lacking a lot of good examples of play makes this trickier all the more. Anyway, guys, I think that's it for the battle scenario. This was a lot of stuff to cover here. I know that this is maybe clunkier than most of my other videos just due to the funkiness of the system that I've had to try to grapple with. But the battle scenario was a good learning experience. I do want to try a campaign. What I'm probably not going to do is a turn one campaign because I think the opening turns I'm not particularly interested in. I might need to look at the setup on the map and like actually go set it up and figure out like, do I want to play this or not? Or do I want to start a little bit later? So for instance, like begin scenario, or maybe scenario one, but like the deepest march table option, because the opening turns I think really are going to be a lot of hopping around without any major engagements really blowing up, and I'd rather get closer to when the action really starts to heat up. We'll have to look at that. I'll have to decide some things too. I don't know. We'll figure it out, guys. But in a while, maybe not right immediately, we will start a campaign game of Highway to the Kremlin. And while we've been playing up here, we've really not gotten to experience this part of the map. We'll look to do that with that opportunity, and we'll introduce some additional game mechanics like the administrative points, which we've really not dealt with, the actual way to know if you're in line of communication, and things like dispatch distance, which we've not had to worry about. We will need to worry about as we get moving forward. All that good fun stuff. So we're gonna figure that out soon enough. This was the battle scenario. I had a good time, despite having it being a really rough learning exercise. Um, we would do that. One other thing to mention, I didn't roll for one of my for a couple of the weather turns, so just to see if that would have really made a difference, I'll do a quick roll here. Fair weather and fair weather. So no, nothing. We had two mud turns. We had a couple of fair weather turns. I guess I needed to roll for maybe that one more. Um, nope, still fair weather. Okay, yeah, two mud turns and several fair turns, and that's it. So anyway, I gotta wrap this up, guys. Thanks for watching. Hope this was interesting to you. We'll cover more of Highway to the Kremlin very soon. Until then, take care. Keep on gaming.